So again, it's an honor for me to have Jennifer here with us today. She's been leading the overall transformation of BNSF and leading the overall legacy modernization. We're going to talk about that today. And what she's going to talk about is essentially how BNSF has begun to do this large transformation and the way that they're going to be mobilizing the trains going forward. So this transformation is not only a technology transformation, but it's a transformation that has been going on the business side for quite some time. And this is a journey that was started about 11 months ago or 12 months ago in terms of getting the right partners to join the organization to be able to execute on this transformation. So some of the things that we're going to hear today that are a little bit different than what we heard during the last session with Ed and Martin is that this transformation is not an outsourcing-driven transformation, but it's actually an overall technology business transformation without managed services. So along the presentation, we're going to learn, and we're going to talk a little bit about some of the differences and how it affects how the service providers work with the organization and what are the expectations that we're seeing today even in the market in terms of revenue and involvement with different teams working together a little bit differently. So again, it's an honor to have you here, Jennifer, joining us today and sharing with everybody here in the Avasant event the overall transformation that BNSF is running today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. So I'll give just a little overview of railroading and BNSF in the railroad. I won't be able to do it justice. In my 20 short years, and yes, I did start as a teenager, I learned something new every single day at the railroad. I had a friend who used to say that railroading wasn't rocket science, it was harder. So I'll try to give you just a little bit. So BNSF, in my opinion, the best railroad, spans 28 states, 3 Canadian provinces, 32,500 route miles. We move 1/4 of the nation's rail freight. Our CEO and president was recently nominated or elected as a Railroader of the Year by Railway Age magazine, and we focus on bettering our capacity, focusing on people and equipment to better meet our customers' needs. Some perhaps little-known facts about the railroad. We are highly fuel efficient, 4 more times than trucks. We're generally more cost efficient. And did you know that 1 train generally equates to 700 trucks on the highways? And we run about 1,600 to 1,800 trains per day. So imagine if all of those trucks were on the road. Being a Berkshire Hathaway company does have its advantages. We have been able to focus on increasing our capacity and focusing on the long term and not the short term. This does come with its challenges. In an ever-regulated environment, even simple changes like asking our crews to carry information on a tablet as opposed to reams of paper that they used to carry around was a regulation change. But enough about that. This is why we're here to talk.
Right, and before Jennifer starts talking about the past and the present on this transformation, it's important to acknowledge here that during the journey that we took to get this transformation going, we work with a lot of you that are sitting here today from the provider side to help us and to help BNSF think about and build some thought leadership in what this transformation needed to be about. So the process and how we work together as a team was a little bit different. We didn't have all the answers, and BNSF developed a very, very solid roadmap with some key core principles, but we wanted to get the value from each of the providers from that thought leadership perspective and help us do the solution on how we needed to execute this transformation. And I think that is what enable the teams to be able to work better together and generate some level of ecosystem now that it is a lot more collaborative in nature and with different type of contracting that in a way changes the way that you have been working with a lot of your customers. Now you have to be working a lot closer with other providers. You have to have mutual NDAs. You have to have several different type of measures that you were not used to in the past. And that kind of collaboration is what brings the business value to the clients, and that is how BNSF is being able to begin the execution of this journey. So now Jennifer is going to talk a little bit about from everything from the beginning on how the legacy systems that were there today are beginning to transform and the effects on the organization, and most importantly, what are the effects on the overall transportation industry. Jennifer.
Thank you, Carlos. So TSS, our Transportation Support System, was first implemented in 1992, 25 short years old. For a 170-year-old company, 25 years old is relatively short. So just a little bit of a tangent. My first job out of college was actually to implement TSS. It wasn't at BNSF, it was at Canadian National. And my running joke with Carlos is this is my retirement project, because it's going to take us a couple of years to get this done. So TSS was originally designed and implemented for people to record information after the fact. The train moved, the car was switched, the car was put on the train. Fast forward 25 short years, and a couple of decades of cost efficiency has gone into adding automation and self-service. And we don't have lines of code and actual statistics from when TSS was originally implemented, but in 7 short years, the lines of code and functionality has doubled. There really isn't enough white space to show how much change has really happened over the last 25 years. So some technology statistics. TSS is currently implemented on 2 mainframes, 3 LPARs, 1 DB2 instance, about 30 million lines of natural and COBOL code. Of course, it's integrated with 70%, direct integration, 70% of every single application that we have at BNSF. I'll draw your attention to the number of SQL operations. 3.6 billion SQL calls daily. Just for some context, we took that stat in 2011, and that was more than the average number of Google searches that was performed daily in 2011. That stat has actually increased to 4.2 billion SQL operations daily. Why? People continue to ask the system, did something change? Want to ask questions like, when am I going to work? Or we have added that automation into the system itself. That combination of natural IMS and DB2 is quite unique. One of our vendors actually told us that you can count on one hand the number of implementations that exist. With that and the number of SQL calls, there is some financial opportunity there. If you'll see, 72% or close to 73% of our cost is related to DB2. So when we talk about an opportunity, there's a little bit of one there. The biggest opportunity, though, is the level of integration. This is an actual picture of the database and application integration. The dots are tables, the colors are functional areas, and the lines are where we read and write to each other's database. So when we first started asking ourselves, is it time to modernize? And actually, we've asked ourselves this question at least 3 times in my career and talked ourselves out of it because it's going to be hard. There were a number of reasons. One was around reducing risk. Talked about people, technology people, not interested necessarily in working in COBOL and natural, but also our business partners who grew up maintaining and supporting this system are also retiring. So our risk is not only with technology and technology people, it is with our business partners as well. We talked about an opportunity to potentially reduce cost. It doesn't mean that that's our main driver. If it happens, that's kind of a side benefit. But really, it's about doing something different. The system is 25 years old. I neglected to mention that it was a port at the time. So the business processes are 35 years old. I'll tell you a little bit of a story. My daughter, who's 9 years old now, was about 3 or 4, and we were out somewhere, and I was responding to some page from work at the time on my BlackBerry. And she asked me if she could play on my iPhone, because my husband had an iPhone at the time. And I said, oh, I don't have an iPhone, I have a BlackBerry. And so she said, well, can I play on your BlackBerry? So I gave her my phone, and she proceeded to try to swipe and handed it back to me and said, it's broken. This was one of my moments where I thought, it's not business as usual anymore. How we operate and how we expect to interact changes.
And from the business value perspective, all these different changes and technologies had a really interesting effect on how the decisions were made. When we were looking at the different technologies, when we were looking at the different values that this will bring to the table, there was always a discussion as what is going to be the business value, and BNSF always came back into the risk, because as it is, the rail is the #1 rail in the country in terms of efficiency, in terms of cost effectiveness. So it was just not about a cost play to do this transformation. It was just a way to get the rail to implement technologies and to do this transformation to be able to keep up with the demand, the growing demand of the business. So when we had the conversations with a lot of the providers, we kept saying, this is not about cost reduction, this is not about infrastructure, this is not about apps just in general. We just need to take a look at things more holistically on how we're going to mitigate risk while doing this transformation. That is kind of being the common denominator in terms of the business driver here and value to the businesses. We gotta keep the risk as low as we can.
That's right. Our COO, who approved this project, actually used to be a CIO in our department. So he understands this system and this problem quite well. And the main thing that he said to us is, don't impact operations.
Don't break it.
So this slide really was, we talked ourselves into modernizing, and it is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to rethink how we do business. So for 35 years, we've kind of been doing it the same way. What better chance to really take a look at how we need to do things?
Jennifer, what was, in your opinion, in some of the discussions that you all had before some of these decisions were made in terms of the change that this was going to represent in the industry overall, in terms of how people, process, and technology needed to change in the organization to be able to successfully go through this journey?
It's a great question, and one that led us to define this particular process that I'll talk about now. But a number of different things, Carlos. Just the way that we do business as a railroad in general is we expect our customers to know railroading. They have to be able to tell us how they want to move equipment and where it needs to go, along with fulfilling all of the regulatory needs that we need to encompass. Well, that maybe not need to be the way in the future. Even today, we're seeing that crude companies want to be able to move their crude to the highest paid bidder at that moment in time. Grain customers want to wait and sell their grain when they can make more money. Tomorrow, we could very much be in the business of needing to ship those Amazon purchases that were made earlier and change how we do business on the fly. It's a different way of doing business. And as technology evolves, and we heard this morning about leveraging technology from a health perspective, that's also true from a railroad health perspective. Our ability to understand where equipment is located, the health of the equipment, the rail, a huge opportunity.
And also interesting to think about how those things were developed with the different teams by using different methodologies like design thinking, things of that nature, to be able to think about what is the better approach and what technologies we need to identify that were related to the business. It was just about bringing the business to the table. The business have been sitting on the table and helping define what technologies and what processes need to be modified to be able to be successful during this transformation.
Absolutely. And this leads into the next slide. So we did define a process that would enable us to iteratively implement our new target state technology and new business processes. I can't tell you all about it because it is sort of considered a trade secret, but loosely built on the scaled Agile framework. We layered in a mechanism to ensure that architecture and design were taken into consideration, but as well an opportunity to consume and understand what we do today and truly ideate or think about how things needed to change in the future. So it sounds pretty simple. You intake work, you think about it, you figure out what it needs to be, you define it, you develop it, and you support it. Only it doesn't happen in one foul swoop. It's not linear in nature. It's highly integrated, just like that hairball that you saw earlier. The way that we need to do work needs to, although funded on mitigating risk, our mantra is to deliver on value. So identifying those opportunities, the business opportunities of what the highest business value is, and implementing that all the time, doing that in small increments and delivering value as we go, as well as integrating with that legacy system, our opportunity.
And it's important to talk about here the effect that's having on the partners that are involved as part of this transformation. The speed in which things are moving, and how in the process that is being followed to be able to execute. Because there is just not one answer. It's not just one answer. Implementing different technologies, bringing different processes, and finding the right resources to transition from where we are today to where we're going in the future is what's different, while having the common denominator of absolutely low risk. So I think that for the ecosystem, for the provider community that we are working with, and BNSF is just being a little bit of a different kind of situation. The money is not, the revenue, the TCV is just not as we default to today, which is the big contracts as we see them in the managed services contracts, but it is more in chunks according to the different sprints. And we're going to talk a little bit about when we look at kind of what that roadmap looks like. But it is just a different kind of delivery. It's a different delivery that requires a lot more patience, and it requires a lot more thought leadership, because that is what the business stakeholders are seeing, and that's what the business stakeholders are expecting to see from the partners.
So due to the integrated nature of TSS, its size, its importance to the railroad, and our edict to not impact operations, we need to take this approach iteratively. And so we developed a pattern to help us implement. We call it free the data, so make the information available in the target state, build the new functionality, integrate that with the legacy, start leveraging that new functionality, and then retire the old. So those iterative loops that I showed you earlier happen as we think about how do we do processes differently, and how do we build the technology in support of those while integrating and then retiring that legacy. So we require a partnership to help us understand, what do we do today, what should we be doing tomorrow, and how do we implement that?
Going 4 months into this transformation, what have been the biggest challenges so far?
Lots of challenges. Some interesting, I think we were expecting to have our business partners really be stuck in how we do things today. I talked about my short career at the railroad, and I'm a teenager when it comes to most railroaders. I mean, 35 years, there's a gentleman who's retiring in a couple months with 55 years of seniority at the railroad. So I was a little bit surprised, happily surprised, when we leveraged this ideation process and thought about what we needed to do differently how many new ideas were really being generated.
What about how the different partners that are involved in the project or in those different projects are working together and being able to collaborate and share IP? It's, things like that.
Yeah. So it clearly is a multi-vendor environment where we are challenging each other to bring thought leadership to the table. And so the whole thought that I can define what I want, create the spec, and hand it off to a team or teams of developers to implement, it just doesn't exist anymore. It truly is a collaborative, iterative approach. And so having everybody think that way and work that way is our opportunity.
And it's been a good opportunity to have the teams collaborate contractually, because when you're sharing IP, when you have your teams working together, when you have to somehow measure performance as a unit, when you have different providers working the same project, it makes things a little bit different, because there is no, what is your fault, it's my fault, what couldn't get this done. It is a project. So that's what, when we think about this kind of transformation, we go in different sprints, using the Agile methodology and in different chunks. So it is not about the 5-year or the 12-month managed services kind of situation. So we go in different chunks.
That's correct. So we're actually looking at 12-week program increments and 2-week sprints within each one of those. So we'll define for 12 weeks directionally what we want to accomplish, but each sprint or each cycle will adjust that. And so it really is a different way of approaching work.
That is the patience that I've talked to you guys about on many occasions, especially with some of you that were part of the selection process of selecting the partners. And when we look at the overall roadmap, and what you see on the screen is a long-term roadmap. It's a 10-year program that is going to be on increments. And those increments that require each of the providers to bring that thought leadership, because we are thinking about the things that we're going to do next as having the same common denominators based on those guiding principles. So different clients do things differently, but this is not a managed services transformation. It will eventually lead to some managed services, and it's going to have some effects into the infrastructure that is required to support it. But again, the increments on how the organization is working with the providers to get through each of those working together is what's the difference.
Yeah, so exactly. Although it's not managed services now, we do need the ability to explore, to try new things, to figure out what works and what doesn't. That learn fast and adjust factor is huge. Yes, we have a roadmap. Yes, based on the current system, its complexity, and the 25 years that we've spent building it, it's not going to happen overnight. But if we want to really rethink what we do, we have to be able to change, and change quickly when the opportunity is upon us.
Good. Is there any questions? Anybody's got any questions, anything that they want to share with us here today?
So the question is, are we re-platforming? Yes and no. So we are moving from the mainframe to an event-driven, service-oriented technology. And what technology we use underneath the covers, it's going to change over time. So while now there are some vendor products and there's some open source that we're looking at, the whole premise is that's going to change. It's probably going to change in 6 months or a year. We need to be able to adjust to that change. So the question is, how is the budgeting done for the program? So we actually had some science and some art in the methodology of how much and how long that developed this particular roadmap. We have a commitment to the overall budget of the program. And while we're talking about mitigating risk and implementing what we need to do in the future, the fact that things could be different, we need to be able to say how much things change over time, and are we willing to make a different investment for that? So commitment for the overall 10-year program. Right now, the committed budget that has been allocated is for the next 5 years.
What variance have you seen?
We really just started, so there isn't a whole big delta. It's been a year and a half right now.
One more question.
So the question is, are there any external customer-facing components to this? Yes, and some of it are not directly in scope for service, but because it is the entire inventory, the location of the trains, and where the equipment is going, it obviously impacts and serves those customer-facing applications. And the customers tell us where and when they want the equipment.
I think we're running out of time, so thanks everybody, and Jennifer, thank you so much for your time and for sharing this experience with all of us today.